In Chapter 2 of our story, we ended with the male Apistogramma constantly chasing the female around the tank. The male was also seen removing young fry from the female's cave and then spitting them out onto the substrate. The female would then pick up these fry and return them to the cave, all while still trying to avoid being attacked by the male. And since all of this was happening in a relatively small tank, I was worried that one of these two fish could be seriously hurt. So I thought it would be best for everyone's safety if I removed the male and allowed the female to care for the young on her own. So that's what I did. The baby Apistogrammas are now about 3 days old, and shortly after they were born, they went through a process known as imprinting. And this is a brief period of time where the babies learn to recognize and become bonded with their mother. Her bold colors and patterns provide specific visual cues that the babies use to help them recognize and follow their mother. And this is how she's able to lead the babies through the tank in search of the best places to feed. The most famous examples of imprinting are found in animals like ducks and geese, who will imprint on the first object that they see at birth. In the wild, this would typically be the mother bird, but scientists have done experiments where they were able to get captive-bred geese to imprint on and even follow a cardboard box. Nonetheless, the baby fish have now imprinted on the bold black and yellow patterns of their mother and follow her as she leads them through the aquarium in search of food. And one of her favorite places to bring the babies is on the right-hand side of the aquarium, where there's a pane of glass that's covered in algae. The algae not only helps process some of the waste products produced by the fish, but it also provides a food source for lots of tiny invertebrates that will then become food for the baby fish. This side of the aquarium is also home to the sponge filter, which not only processes the waste products produced by the fish, but it's also a great place for the fry to find food. And even though these baby fish are pretty good at following their mother as she moves around the aquarium, every now and then she has to take matters into her own hands and move one of her babies the only way that she can. And since she doesn't have any hands, she uses her mouth to move the fry from one place to another. She'll even pick up one of her babies and give it a quick cleaning in her mouth if it seems to be struggling. Now keep your eyes on the mother fish and you'll be able to see her picking up the babies and moving them from one place to another. If she notices that one of her babies has been motionless for a long time, she'll swim over, pick it up in her mouth, and give it a quick cleaning. She'll also pick up and move one of her babies if it wanders too far away from the group. But sometimes she'll grab one of them for no apparent reason at all. Now I've stopped the video here so that I can show you something that you may have missed just a second ago. Because just before this mother fish grabs this fry, she stops to eat this baby brine shrimp. And then, for no apparent reason at all, she grabs the fry, swishes it around in her mouth, and then lets it go. And here's a great example of the mother fish using her mouth to try and help one of her babies that seems to be having a bit of trouble. It might have something crawling on it that's causing some discomfort, so she tries to help using the best tool that she has. And here's another example where she helps one of her babies that seems to be struggling. She gives it a quick cleaning, and now it seems to be fine. It probably just had something crawling on it. Here, the mother fish has gathered her young on this rock just outside of the coconut cave, and I'm quite sure that there are lots of visual signals that she uses to communicate with her young that help them follow her directions. And right now, she wants them to stay near this rock. But she's a little angry with me at the moment because I'm a bit too close to her young, and she's not afraid to let me know exactly how she feels. She watches me very closely while still continuing to scan her surroundings for any sign of danger. And now she's decided it's time to move her young from the rocks to a different part of the aquarium. So she gives them a signal and her babies begin to swim across the tank in search of food. They follow their mother, but they follow each other as well. So it only takes a few babies to start moving before everyone else follows along. There are lots of places for these little fish to explore, so it's a constant challenge for this mother fish to keep all of her children together and safe from harm. But under the watchful eye of their devoted mother, these baby fish will grow quickly, and soon they'll have to leave this planted tank and move into a larger, more simplistic grow-out tank where they'll be easier to maintain. Clean water and a steady supply of live food are super important at this early stage of their development. So I feed these little fish lots of microworms and baby brine shrimp 2 or 3 times a day. Here they are eating microworms, which are an easy live food to culture and feed to your baby fish. So I have 4 different microworm cultures going at all times. This tank also contains lots of naturally occurring microorganisms that are often collectively known as infusoria. The infusoria feed on decomposing waste products produced by the fish, the plants, and the leftover food, and many of the infusoria will then become a source of food for the baby fish. So when I set up a new aquarium with the intention of breeding fish, I always try to encourage the growth of infusoria by using live plants and by allowing detritus and mulm to build up in the tank. And in a mature planted tank, there's a small but nearly constant supply of tiny creatures that these little fish can find and eat. But when we treat our aquariums with toxic chemicals to get rid of things like planaria and hydra, we also inadvertently wipe out a whole host of harmless microorganisms that are actually beneficial to our fish. Stable water parameters are also important, so I prefer to do small, gradual water changes, and I've never changed more than 2 gallons of water at a time in this 10-gallon breeding tank. I do have to clean up the occasional leftover fish pellets that the mother fish didn't eat, but other than that, this aquarium is relatively easy to maintain. The real trouble will come when it's time to move these fish into a larger aquarium because they're very difficult to catch unless you have them in a bare tank. Sometimes I'll remove a group of fry using a siphon hose, which can be very effective when they're still small, but as they get older, they become much more difficult to catch. Leaving the fry with their mother as long as possible is always the best option, and fry who remain in her care will usually grow faster than fry who are raised separately. However, if you do decide to remove the babies and put them in a separate tank, the female will be ready to spawn again within a week or two at the most. Just remember to keep the fry in a relatively small tank so that they can easily find their food. Nonetheless, these fish gave me no trouble whatsoever. They were easy to breed and the babies were easy to raise to maturity. The adults did tend to be rather shy, but I think that having some dither fish in the tank may have helped with that. But adding a second species to the tank usually creates some additional issues, especially when it comes to breeding fish like cichlids, who tend to be very protective of their young. And this is why in nearly all of my videos you'll see the fish in single species setups, because I like to breed my fish and I prefer to have as few problems as possible, so I try to keep things as simple as I can by limiting the population to just one species. These baby Apistogrammas will grow quickly, and in about 3 months from now they should reach a length of about 1.5 inches or 4 centimeters, and then at that point I'll be able to sell them to a local shop. You can increase their growth rate by doing large daily water changes and providing them with a near constant supply of live food. But finding a home for 50 baby Apistogrammas is not always easy to do, because my local shop might sell 2 of these fish every few months. So when I walk through the door with 50 baby Apistos, I practically have to give them away. But I have a great relationship with my local fish store, and they're always willing to help me find homes for my fish. But it's always important to breed responsibly and not create a bunch of fish that you don't have room for or that you can't sell. If I didn't have a place to sell my baby fish, I'd either have to stop breeding so many of them, or I'd have to get a big predator-type fish to eat all of the extra fry that I didn't have room for. But I've tried that in the past when I used a polypterus to eat my excess fry, but I ended up feeling sorry for the little fish as they cowered in the corner of the polypterus tank trying to avoid being eaten, so that idea didn't work out too well. The baby Apistogrammas are now 6 days old and still being carefully guarded by their mother. They're growing quickly on a steady diet of baby brine shrimp, microworms, and lots of clean water. A smaller tank like this one keeps the fry and their food concentrated in a small area so they don't have to go very far to find something to eat. If you use too large of a tank, the fry don't seem to grow as quickly because they have more trouble finding their food. As time passes, the fry become more and more independent, and they start to wander further and further away from their mother until they're no longer swimming together as a tight group. Nonetheless, she'll continue protecting them until she spawns again, at which point the fry will be seen as a threat to her new offspring. These are cichlids after all, so they take their parenting very seriously, and it's best to keep a close eye on them, especially if you're housing several fish together that have reached sexual maturity. And one of the ways to keep aggression to a minimum is to house the group in a bare tank where there's no opportunity for them to stake out and defend their own territories for spawning. Nonetheless, if you've never bred an egg-laying fish before, then the Apistogramma cacatuoides would be a great place to start. They stay small, so you can keep them in a 20-gallon long tank. Furthermore, they're not hyper-aggressive like many other cichlids. Plus, they're easy to feed, and their young are relatively easy to raise to maturity. So they're a great fish to give you some experience breeding an egg layer. They also have lots of interesting behaviors that are fun to watch. The baby Apistogrammas are now a little over 2 months old, and it's time to move them into a large grow-out tank where I'll raise them for another month or so before I bring them to a local shop. Here they can be seen eating baby brine shrimp, but I've also made sure that they're eating flakes and small pellets as well, so that whoever owns them next will have no trouble feeding them. Now, if I had to try and pick a male from this group of fry, I would choose the largest fish in the group, because the males tend to be larger than the females. And if I wanted to choose a potential female for him, I would choose one of the smallest fish in the group, while trying to avoid any fish that is obviously a runt. And I think that this method would give me a pretty good chance of selecting a pair. But other than the differences in their size, these fish are still a month or two away from being able to sex them accurately, which I can usually do at around 3 to 4 months of age. And in typical cichlid fashion, they're already starting to show signs of aggression by the time they're 2 months old. And now it's off to the grow-out tank for these little fish, but I don't think that they're going to like it very much. There's no substrate, there's no driftwood, and there are no plants, so it's nothing like the home that they've always known. Well, that brings this chapter of our story to an end, but in the next chapter we'll take a quick look at one of the baby Apistogrammas that didn't do nearly as well as its brothers and sisters.